Hello and welcome to another amazing Gnomon event tonight. My name is Mauricio Hoffman. I am an animation director and Gnomon's education lead for the animation track. And I'm going to be your stream host tonight. Now, before we start the stream, I want to take a little minute to thank Lenovo for supporting this stream. Without their generous sponsorship, these events would not be possible. So thanks again, Lenovo, for your continuous support. All right, are we ready? Let's get going. We have a really good stream planned for you tonight. Our guest is Scott Ingalls from Bento Entertainment, and let me tell you a little bit about him. So Scott Ingalls has been director and producer of animated commercials, television shows, theme park attractions, games, and events. He currently works as a timing director as Bento Box on an upcoming show called Grimsburg, featuring the voice of John Hamm. So please help me to welcome Scott to tonight's stream. Scott, welcome.
Hey, Mo, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. So tell us a little bit about what you do. We're ready to hear everything, from the beginning, very high level, what you do, and maybe you can take us to a little tour about what are what software you use and how do you use it to create this amazing shows.
Absolutely. Well, you know what I'd love to do is, I always hate following Gnomon student work because it's so good. Even with our show that is aired and is currently on Hulu, but I'd love to just let some of the work speak for itself, show you some of what the stuff I'm talking about, and then we'll tuck into the weeds and get into, how we make it happen and the tools I use.
Fantastic. You're going to show us a little animation. We love watching some animation.
Super.
Perfect.
Are you ready to rock?
Yeah, that sounds right.
2, 3, 4.
This is the end, I saw you again. Today, I had to turn my heart away.
Smile like the sun, kisses for everyone, and tails, it never fails.
You're lying so low in the weeds.
I bet you
gotta ambush me. You had me down on my knees.
Now would ya, Barracuda?
Shouldn't we be supporting Duncan?
No! 2 old guys are playing guitar!
Woo! I love whatever kind of music this is called.
Hey, you closed down my mom's cupcake shop!
Woo!
Oh my God, they love it.
I don't want this to end!
We can't destroy the axe hole. I'll go bankrupt, I don't care.
We'll run the store together. I'll move in with you and Annie. We already discussed it.
Huh?
Did someone say keep on rocking?
Yeah! Oh, it's a dud.
Ronnie D! Rock on!
Wanna jam?
There
we go.
Awesome.
Yes, and that clip features a cameo, a featured appearance from Dave Grohl, who just was so, his voice work was spectacular. What he brought to the episode was amazing. That's kind of why I grabbed that one for this particular introduction to what we're doing.
That is awesome. That was really, really fun. So give us a little bit of a background for anybody that doesn't know the show or just started watching. What's a little bit of what's the show about? What's some of the background?
Okay, so Duncanville is basically it's Amy Poehler's show. She plays both Duncan and Duncan's mom. And I tell you what, I work with Amy Poehler's voice like day in, day out. And when I was on that show, and when she performed Duncan, like I could never hear her in the voice. You listen to these tracks over and over and over, and every time I'd hear it, I'd just be like, oh my God, I cannot hear her performing it, which is really great. And Ty Burrell plays Duncan's dad, and it's basically, you know, misadventures of a teenager in contemporary times, and it's in a lot of ways very true. A lot of truths in parenting, a lot of truths in teenaging, but a fun show. And I'm really proud of the work we did in it, and how funny it is. There were clips that literally I had trouble working on because I was laughing so hard, and you know, I don't want to say that's rare, but it's awesome when that happens, when you just actually can't focus on the work because you're too busy laughing at it.
I think that's something that Bento Box does really, really well, that relatability with characters, but also put them in extraordinary situations, like the guys that are like fighting with the spinning signs.
Yeah, the sign spinning duel. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but at the same time, we understand them. There's like that relatability. We know about the old dudes that want to get together and you know, continue to make the band. So all those things are relatable, but the situation is extraordinary, right? Like with the fireworks and with the destruction of the guitar shop. They do that with, you guys do that with Bob's Burgers. You guys do that with a lot of your shows, and I love that. So yeah, it's amazing. It's
a great studio to work at. I'm very lucky. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna be quiet, and I'm gonna let you do the presentation. But yeah, we want to see how you do this.
Right. Well, and the elephant in the room is what I'm actually here to talk about is the job of an animation timing director. And that's something that is so specific and so unique that it's actually going to require a little bit of time, Mo, at the blackboard to actually describe it. So,
sounds good.
Yeah. So we're just gonna do a little role playing here. So Fleeco Pix presents what is a timing director in the episodic animation pipeline, starring you. So for those of you watching, this narrative is based on you. All your hard work and success is paid off. Now you get to be a director. So what do you do in the animation pipeline? Well, I'm glad you asked. You're going to start with a script, hopefully an awesome script. You might tool it into being an awesome script. But when you get your script, you're going to start to turn it into storyboards, right? You're going to direct all your storyboard artists. If you're a supervising director, you're going to be directing the directors to direct the storyboard artists. And they're going to visually tell the story that was in your script, right? If you're lucky, you maybe have had a table read. But if you're not, you're just starting to draw from the script. And then you're going to turn it into an animatic, and you're going to cut it all together. And then you're going to send all the drawings you did and the animatic overseas. And then when it comes back all fully animated, you're going to take one last look and edit. You're going to cut it up together. And then you're going to send it out to broadcast where your mom's going to watch it. And then you get your Emmy. Yay. Yeah, easy as that, right? Only it's not as easy as that. So what tends to happen is your script has to go back to the show creators, right? And once your script goes back to the show creators, it probably has to go to the network and definitely has to go to this thing called S&P. And for those of you who don't know episodic animation, S&P stands for Standards and Practices. And they are the legal group affiliated with the network who tell you are dropping too many F-bombs in your show for a child's show. So then you may even have actors, if they're stakeholders or creators, and all of these people are going to come back to you with changes. And you've already kind of sent them the script. Probably they're not very punctual about it. So these changes are going to have to get executed in the storyboard and animatic phases. So again, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking these storyboards, you're drawing, you're visually telling the story, right? And then you're going to be cutting it together, and you as the director are probably going to be launching your storyboard artists, but actually watching the changes happening in the animatic phase. And then, you know, you're going to send your animatic out to recording. So this animatic ends up being the new item that you're sending all over the place. It has to go to the recording studio so all the actors can record to the picture, and it goes back to the show creators, and it goes back to the network, and it might even go to S&P, who tells you, nope, there's still too many F-bombs in your children's show. So then you've got more changes, right? So now you are definitely hitting those in storyboarding. So you're visually retelling the story that you already retold. And you're going to see it as the director in the edit room and the couch behind your editor, who is cutting it all together and spending extra hours And meanwhile, the weeks are passing by because the studio that is going to animate this for you has a start date that is contracted. And so you have space in their animation pipeline. So all these changes are burning down your clock, right? So when you send this another version of Animatic back to the show creators in the network and S&P, it is going to break your heart because they're going to decide that the only way to tell this story is as a musical. So now you're going to make a musical out of it. And that's definitely back to scripting, because now you're writing music and you're re-recording and you're storyboarding and you're singing now. And so now you've gone through this process and you're still meeting it back in Animatic. You've had to retell this visual story 3-4 times now. You're going to send it back to the show creators in the network and they're going to tell you it's not bad. So you've taken your awesome script that maybe you had a hand in and you've made it into a not bad script. And that means it's time to send it out. And
so the Animatic is basically like the buffer between knowing that you're going to start full-on production and everything that is pre-production, right? It's like the last bastion of pre-production. Is that correct?
Well, sort of. So what ends up happening is the Animatic is really the art of gisting. Like, it is the art of getting the gist across of how your story should be told visually. And so before you send your Animatic overseas, you have to kind of come in really tight. Oh, yeah, there they are. They barely fit in between. And this little department that puts the finishing touches on, it's kind of the finishing tailoring to your Animatic, is a group of people called, and we'll have lip assignment, we'll have timing directors and checkers. Typically, this is supervised by a supervising timing director. I work for a great one named Randy Ledensky, who I'm a protege of his. He's taught me so much and has taught so many people in the industry so much. He actually wrote the book on, he wrote the textbook for timing and harmony. So this group of people is going to take the gist of your Animatic and turn it into actionable notation. And it's going to have everything in it all of a sudden that will make it specific enough to animate overseas. And then, you know, you can get back to your vision of the pipeline as it existed. When it goes overseas, you can edit and, you know, it'll broadcast and you'll win your Emmy. So that's it for the Blackboard discussion. And I'm going to wait to get back to camera, he says. Perfect. And so so really, the timing director exists in this last little moment where the Animatic's been kind of blessed off on, it's locked, and ideally you have very few changes, although, you know, that's an ideal world. And what you do is you then...
I want to stop you for just 1 second. For anybody that doesn't know what an Animatic entails, like, can you very briefly just describe what, you know, since we're throwing that word a lot, just in case anybody's not familiar with the animation process, we can talk a little bit about what exactly is the Animatic.
Right. Well, the Animatic is the storyboards that have all been filmed and, well, scanned, and they're actually all created digitally now. We don't even scan pictures, you know what I mean? We just, it all is generated on a Cintiq, like the one you see before me. So anyway, there are the drawings all linked together in a timeline and cut together with the voices. And we're going to be taking a look at that in Harmony. So to jump ahead just a bit, I work in a program called Toon Boom Harmony, and I work in the X-Sheet function of Toon Boom Harmony. And we do a lot of work that before was very difficult, very time-consuming and somewhat limited on a digital platform, and it allows us to have much better control over the animation. We get a lot better results as you know, from using it. So and in fact, Mo, I plan to show a bit of the Animatic when we get into Harmony. So if the Animatic has been, if that's something that you're not familiar with, you'll be familiar with it in about a minute and a half. So what my job basically is making notation that an animator can look at and say, okay, what this person wants is a head turn that takes 5 frames, and it should start at frame 297 and go to, oh, damn it, I did it where I have to add. Go 5 frames later. And so I make that notation in an X-sheet. And an X-sheet is rather like, I'm gonna change my screen here again. is rather like the way musical notation is, right? Like musical notation is super organized. And in fact, I'm sure a musicologist would look at what we do and say, no, you're not organized at all. Because ours is still a little subjective. But really, we have meter and we have notation of how long things take within that meter and where they're going. So in a way, we're not totally unlike musical notation. Our notation used to be done all on paper, and we'd have these long pages that we could write our action, and in this case, dial stands for dialogue. And it used to be that we'd shoot, you know, back in the days of Scooby-Doo and Yogi Bear, we would have cell levels, and we would use actual acetate cells. And so these are actually numbering your cell levels. This is your background, and then this is the big column for camera instructions. So we worked on these for ages and ages, and if you can tell, there's kind of a meter to it. There's a heavier line, and there's different permutations of these X sheets, but they all basically say the same thing, and they all are meant to vertically track your action frame by frame. So each one of these represents one frame, and you have certain space to allocate to each of the things you want to allocate, right? These are really camera sheets more than timing sheets. Timing sheets has more space for action, and we don't need the 5 layers anymore because we don't work on acetate. So let me say one more thing, which is, if you remember my when I started, I was talking about how there's lip assigners, and we fortunately I work with just a lip assigner who, every time I see her initial on the sheets, I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is going to be perfect, and it always is. It's great. So lip assign is something where someone studies a track read, listens to the track, and then marries a mouth position to that. So this is going to be kind of a little jumping off point for us for how we make our notation, because what we begin with is, of course, a recorded performance of, let's say, Ty Burrell in his rock concert with David Grohl, right? And when we assign the lip, we don't use phonetic mouth assignments. We use these A, B, C, D, E, but it's not the sound you would make for A. A is a closed mouth. B is a slightly open mouth. C is a big open mouth. D is an even bigger open mouth. And so on and so forth, right? So when we're doing this type of work, what we do is we begin with a track read, and then we have our lip assign, and I can now show you what that looks like. There's a little bit of background for an actual X sheet. So this is the X sheet to part of what you were looking at. In kind of a simplified form, and if you look right here in this highlighted, you'll see A, B, C, E. And so this is the lip assign, like I just showed you, A, B, C, E. So that's what has been assigned to these frames. So at frame 27, right, we're going to an A mouth. And then in frame 29, we're going to a B mouth. So as you can tell, we're really in the weeds with, like, we are focused in. We're really going fine focus on what this character is doing. So that in a minute and a half, you'd see an animatic. So this space that you're looking at right now is Toon Boom's Harmony, right? So Toon Boom is a software company. Harmony is the program. And Harmony has this X sheet interface that I use to do my work. Now, as you can tell, there's a camera, and then there's this other thing down here. You can actually look at the action. If you're familiar with After Effects, you can look at it like this, and it'll have your layers and in a format that a lot of animators are very familiar and happy working with, because this is how you work in animation, you know. But in timing, we tend to work based off our lip assign. And the reason for that is lip assign is a visual cue. The A position, where your mouth is at an A, is where you want certain actions to happen, right? So, I'm sorry, back to the question, what is an animatic? So, an animatic, as you can see, these are the storyboards, right? The storyboard panels of that my colleagues in the storyboarding department put together. And this is what they drew, right? And there's a camera move on it. So, you know, they're using pretty slick tools. Like they drew this probably in this far out position and then zoomed in. In fact, when we look at the line quality, we can tell they zoomed in, right? So this, when it's strung together, is the animatic. And what I'll do is I'll play that for you right now.
Oh my God, they love it.
I don't want this to end.
Asshole, I'll go bankrupt. I don't care.
We'll run the store together. With you and Annie. We already discussed it. Huh? Did someone say keep on?
So as you can see, this is a lot more simple than what we originally looked at. But significantly more. It's a pared down version, but this is the way we visually get the story up on its feet, the way we look at the action, and the way we're able to show it to our colleagues over at the network, the way we're able to show it to the show creators, and the way the actors can see it so they can record their dialogue. So why isn't this ready to send overseas, right? Well, part of what the timing director does is we kind of have Mo, do you remember that old movie, The Zero Effect? It's an old Bill Pullman movie where he played a private investigator, and he said, you know, I'm a master. My method is through using the two obs, observation and objectivity. So when we watch an animatic like this, what we see in the boards is the gist of the visual story, right? I'm just going to play a bit for you, and we'll tuck into it in a second.
Oh my God, they love it.
I don't want this to end.
Can't destroy the asshole.
Okay, the visual gist there, right, is pretty simple to pick up. Basically what's happened is Jack slid down the stage. He picks up that little pedal that they've changed to be the pyro bomb that they're going to use to destroy the guitar store, which is called the Axle, and he pushes it away, right, so that they don't use it. But when you get really into objectively looking at the story, this is where the necessity for the timing director comes in. And you know, the first question in our little you know, the little blackboard thing I wrote might be, hey, if I'm the director, why do I have this other director like out, you know, in this hidden area in the studio just doing his work in you know, almost obscurity? And the answer is you want someone who can function at a director level to just do this tailoring. You want someone who can look at it, see the small problems, and if there's a bigger problem, know when to come back to you and say, hey, there happens to be a problem. Like, for instance, the supervising timing director goes through every episode with the supervising director, and they look at all these things and they say, ooh, you've got a continuity flaw here, you've got a continuity flaw there. And then when we get launched on a sequence, truly, it's been discussed. But you don't want to have to go back to storyboarding and fix this when we can fix it in timing direction. Okay, and let me show you what I'm talking about. If you notice where this is Ronnie D and Jack is on his knees and Ronnie D is standing up here. If you notice where his guitar is, and then you look for the cut, you're gonna see, he says, looking for the cut. Okay, so here's Ronnie D, and then we cut to Jack. But if you really look at it, shouldn't Ronnie D's guitar be obscuring Jack, truly? So this is the kind of continuity that doesn't matter in the gist of a storyboard. Like in the gist of a storyboard, this is perfect language. Like that totally plays. But we're going to look for a little solution to this. What we would tend to do is we would say, okay, what is the minimally invasive? What's the minimum impact we could have on the scene and just fix this little thing of continuity? And the answer is we're just going to provide a little thumbnail that's going to just lower his guitar. So as he's playing, he lowers his guitar, and now it's pretty viable that it would be out of frame in the next scene. So that little kind of continuity fix is part and parcel of what the animation timing director does. Now, there's shows that are super tied down. I don't want to make it sound like every single show does this, but I would say Duncanville is a fairly well tied down show. You know, the boards were always coming in very clean, very on model, and but this little bit of continuity, you know, the temptation is to say, well, why didn't they catch that? But when you think of like the process I was talking about, you know, they've gone back and forth, they've changed so much. They might have had it different and it got changed in edit. There's no telling what led up to the moment that had this like super minor continuity flaw. But the good news is we're here and we can fix it. And if you notice on my right hand, he says, holding his right hand up to the camera. If you notice, I'm a Cintiq artist, so and we're still on my. I'm gonna wait for the camera to pick up my glove here. There we go. If you notice, I work all day at a Cintiq with a. I do tons and tons of handwriting and drawing, so I'm always wearing one of these fancy jammy Cintiq gloves. So that's why my hand looks strange on camera, in case you're picking it up. So so while we're here, let me just talk about my workspace, because having a little bit of familiarity with Gnomon, no Gnomon video would be complete without the discussion of workspace, right? So I use a Cintiq with a keyboard at its feet. Now I have an older Cintiq, so I actually do have my external buttons, and I use them a lot. The one I use the most is, of course, undo. But you know, copy and paste is up here too. Since I work sitting down and not standing up, I tend not to keep my left hand on my Cintiq very much. I tend to work with one hand on my keyboard a lot, because we can type things and we can, you know, copy paste down here. It's just a little easier than working perpetually. But I kind of truly, you know, I work here a lot. I found that even when I have my finger on the button, right, I don't path these as well as I path a keyboard. So I can copy paste that way a little easier. The beneath my camera is a 4K monitor that I keep up for viewing. Not really necessary because I'm not doing color correct, I'm not doing final, but it's the monitor I have. And I'm working on basically a hand-built Asus. I think it's I can't even remember the motherboard specifications, but it's a Windows computer, Asus motherboard with you know, two terabyte hard drives and a I don't know which card I'm running anymore. Back to you on that. Well, if anyone's really curious about the video card, this is not a video card intensive program. It's, you know, almost any video card will work with it.
Now, let me ask you a question about Toon Boom, if you don't mind me asking. I remember playing a little bit with an older version of Toon Boom Harmony. It was called Toon Boom Animator something. Animator Pro, I believe. And what I really loved about it is that it was very easy to draw, but it also generate vector images. So it was also like, when you wanted to edit the stroke, it was actually very nice because you could actually make it, you know, edit it really quick, and even like intersecting lines, you were able to delete certain parts. You were able to just really nicely edit your drawings, and that is still the case, correct?
Yeah, this is a vector drawing tool. So everything I would draw, like this thumbnail that you see that I did the cooking show on, These are all vector lines. So you can actually, the thing about it is if they're connected, it'll all select together no matter what part you select. So you see everything that was connected to the little bit I grabbed can come with me and go anywhere I want it to. So so if you want to, move a part of it, you kind of have to break stuff in order to move it. And so, but like you said, it's a vector base. I'm going to do the demo of this again. So you can move lines. The thing I really like about it is I find the tapering to be a little bit better than Photoshop's, in that when you taper, I mean, I just drew a blob, so yay me. Wait a minute, let me actually give you a real brush here. Okay. Sometimes in Photoshop, your taper just isn't quite as, it gets a little, I'm trying to imitate, like it comes on a little strong, and you can adjust all those dynamics in Harmony, and I find that easier to work with than just drawing in Photoshop. And the vector drawing, like you said, you can, like everything you draw is a vector image, so you're literally, as you draw it, it's not relevels. You can scale it infinitely, and it'll have the same, character. It's a very easy drawing tool. Of course, I use it all in red because all I'm doing is showing, revisions to the frames that are there. And you know what? This is actually Harmony 17, because I think Harmony is on 21 right now, and the inner, but Harmony 17, Harmony 20, and Harmony 21, the functions I use as a timing director haven't changed in any of those iterations. They're all the same. I function test everything. I was just teaching a class for the Animation Guild, and so they needed to teach in 21, and 21 was causing problems with my daily work because all Harmony wanted to do was suddenly put out 21 documents, and so I had to revert to 17. But I tested all the stuff, and it's consistent. I know Harmony is supposed to be retro compatible, but it wants to be in its latest version if it's inhabiting your computer. So to get back to the X sheets and where the job of the timing director begins and ends, I was showing you these small details, right? And I was showing you the lip assign, and one of our critical functions, and this is back from, when we used to slug boards, meaning back in the days of film, a guy would sit there with a stopwatch and time how long each shot should hold on a in a sequence, and then they'd slug the animation paper so that you knew how long scenes were. But we can fix that pretty fluidly now. And one of the places we look for as a timing director is, if you notice, Jack's closed mouth pose is right here, right? He goes into that F mouth pose. So he's going to make this mouth, right? But truly, we in on him. We want to cut in on him in this A mouth when it's nice and closed, right? But if you look, Ronnie D does his poses out to here, right? So his mouth doesn't close to here. Again, technology being what it is, this is very fluid for us. We can adapt this. So what we want to do is capture Jack's A, right? His A mouth, lip assign. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to change Ronnie D's lip assign. And we're going to compress it a bit. Now, anyone who knows animation will know suddenly his mouth is going to just move on ones and it's going to be really tight, right? And it's just not going to look right when it's done. Well, the thing about that is, because he's going to go suddenly in 3 frames from a B to J to an A. and it's going to look like a little whip, right? Like his mouth is just going to do this little whip when his voice is still going, you know, and he's saying and, but we're having him whip in 3 frames. Why would we ever want to do that? The answer is because in a digital editing suite, we can expand out those 3 frames at no cost, right? So without adding time, without changing the cut we're sending over, again, what we look for as a timing director is minimally invasive fixes. We're really tailoring here, right? We've got a fine needle and thread. This allows us to change a little bit, but gain back all those mouth positions, right? Because really, nothing else is going to change in these 3 frames. We're deliberately going to keep it all the same, so that way, when we get our animation back from overseas, we can look at it, and you know, experienced editors know exactly what's happening. When they hear overlapping dialogue, they'll say, oh, let's see if they gave us our mouth assignments, and they'll go back and they'll unpack these, and they can literally spread these out as far as they need to go. Now, here's the next thing we're going to do. This cut line currently changes right here, right? So that if we cut on this frame, our first frame of business, right, is first of all, it's an odd frame, so we don't want that. We always want it to be even. But we can change our cut, and I'm going to show you the first most major thing about Harmony. We have a very sophisticated library for what we can do, and so what we're going to do is drop a cut line. Whoops! Oh, I'm sorry. I instinctively grabbed the one that was right, even though I'm trying to kind of do it a little wrong. So now our first frame is odd, and it's Jack's A pose, right? And we've got Ronnie D here. If we really wanted to do ourselves some favors, what we would do is put this JA. What? We put this. That's one of the features of Harmony. It's called the infinite in between. And it's going to really fight me on this because it hates doing exactly what I'm doing. Okay, come on now. Okay, there we go. So now we have only really one piece of Ronnie D on a 1. That's going to be easy to spread out to however far we want it before we cut to Jack's shot. Now, when we cut to Jack's shot, it's just not going to matter, right? Like Ronnie D is going to have a closed mouth. He's got a mustache. We're really not going to miss his dialogue, unless we want it. And so what we're going to do, form the animatic. So now our animatic cuts right? And we've sustained Ronnie's closed mouth and Jack's closed mouth. Now this is a little tiny piece of business, right? Like just grabbing those lip assigns and you know, the question is, well, don't we want that cut to be in the middle of the line? Well, probably. But this way the editor has a choice when he gets his footage back from overseas. You know, he can decide where to put it as opposed to have no choice. On Duncanville, we actually saved post-production. What they told us was that we saved a month of post-production from the work coming back overseas because we built in this kind of just conservation of lip assign. So anyway, very minor thing. So let's look at some of the other stuff, and then we'll talk about the notation. So one of the other things that we have here is Jack is reaching for this pedal, right? So he says, you know, well, let's take a look at what he says. He says,
we can't destroy the axle.
Okay, we can't destroy the axe hole, right? So he's reaching for that pedal that says pyro on it, right? So let's take a look at how he reaches for it. So here's the storyboard. Okay, so it didn't, if you look at it, I don't think he used the Force. I'm pretty sure it's not Jedi stuff here. But as you can see, it pops into his hand, and then he lifts it up, but he's holding it over the top, and then he's holding it under the bottom, right? So this is a very, I don't want to say, I don't ever want to be I don't ever want to say anything that sounds like I don't fully respect what my colleagues go through, because I really respect the storyboarding process. I've done it. I totally get what they're up against. This is very common, that you have a bit of action that you're going to show, and you draw it in a way that literally can't actually happen. And that's just, that's how you get through the day. And that's perfectly fine. That's why I'm here, is to just make sure that we do a little something to get this to actually be something a human hand can do. So what we're going to do is change a few things. And I'm going to do a cooking show on you here. So this was the first thing I changed. I changed just where the pedal was going to be and cheated it a little bit to Jack so that he didn't have to reach as far. So if you look, the original was here, and I just cheated the pedal just slightly, right? Again, minimally invasive. I'm trying to not change something that would make sense. Like, it'd make even more sense if the pedal was tilted more towards him. But then would it make sense? Because, that direction is the direction a guitarist would want their pedal facing. So again, minimally invasive work. And then when Jack reaches for it, here he is reaching for it on top. Another thing that is very common is when you your visual story is you're going to tell that story oftentimes with what we call in-betweens in animation, right? There's extremes and in-betweens, and the in-betweens exist in between the extremes. It's super hard to call out an in-between and land it properly in an overseas animation studio. What you really want to do is call out your extremes. So this is not an extreme, right? So it's not an extreme, and truly we can't pick it up that way because he just can't get it. He can't turn his body in such a short amount of time and actually show the word pyro. So we're going to change the way Jack reaches for this. We're going to give him a different drawing, right? So now he's reaching for it as at the bottom of the pedal, okay? So again, what we've done is we've changed the pedal, right? Very minimally. And we've changed Jack very minimally. Like really, this kind of difference doesn't change the story. It doesn't change the shot. It doesn't change his character. It literally is just this tiny little mechanical difference that allows him to complete this gesture correctly in an anatomically correct and physiologically correct way, right? So, but now it's going to be a little bit different here. So we've painted ourselves into this corner, and we're going to just live with it. So now we're going to have him pick it up and show it from here to here. So that little bit of tailoring is the kind of thing that the timing director is constantly watching out for. Just little things that, it just tells it that much cleaner. It tells it that much better. It gives it that kind of, just that little extra polish so that your props aren't popping in different directions.
You're making also the life of the animators a lot easier because they don't have to figure out when the extremes don't make sense. In a way, it reminds me a little bit. I know it's a strange image, but it reminds me a little bit of Harvey Keitel's character in Pulp Fiction. You're kind of like the cleaner.
That's a very flattering comparison. I don't feel that cool all the time. But that is not. Is it? I don't like to use the word fixing because I don't like to suggest that my colleagues did anything that was broken. You know what I mean? Because they told a great story. They visually, it's a great visual story, and it's fun and it's funny. So I hate saying, well, we're going to fix that for you if that makes anyone feel bad. I prefer to just say, oh, we're just going to tailor this so it works a little smoother. And I know it's semantics, but are we the fixer of that situation? I mean, again, that's a very glamorous portrayal of what we do. We're really.
I like what you just said. Also, I think that is also very generous of you to just give the storyboards their place, and saying that what you're doing instead of fixing is cleaning or tidying it up. I think it's a fair assessment. So I like that.
Well, mostly when I sit down and do my work, the approach I come to it with is I want to assure creative continuity, right? So what the creators of the show, what my colleagues, you know, in the story department and in the edit department, and you know, what everyone has brought to this so far, I want to maintain that continuity, and I want to fortify it so that when it goes overseas, it doesn't break apart. Because if you can imagine, you know, if we would have sent this overseas, we might get it back and say, "Ooh, what's up with his hand?" And it could be
it's like an animation that it's probably like wrong, or that thing is flipping or something. Like they figure it out in a way that doesn't quite work out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Worse yet, yeah, if they put a fix on it where like suddenly he's handing it hand to hand, or you know what I mean? Like if they really, usually you don't see them swinging for the fences very much. You'll see them, you know, that's how you drew it. That's what's happening. You know, you may be able to fix some of this with notation, like, you know, he reaches to grab the pedal, as opposed to, you know, we saw that in the original drawings, let's see, it was the F pose. So in the original drawings, you know, we could fix this with notation. We could say reaches and grabs pedal, and they wouldn't assume that he's using the force and the pedal levitates. But this fix will make sure that what he does has a better bit of business. But again, like I say, it's about assuring creative continuity through the process and making it strong enough so that there's not a lot of questions when it goes overseas. And I'm, you know what, I quoted Bill Pullman about objectivity and observation. So really, one of the things that I have to do is I have to look and say, okay, what am I looking at? You know, what, not just what am I feeling in this shot, what's the, you know, but what am I looking at? And again, this is kind of like the technical nuts and bolts, because really what the timing director loves to do, and what we don't talk about enough, is this is where the acting happens. Because were you to just go from this or to this, even though it's got continuity now, the question is how, because if you notice, this expression is slightly different from this expression, right? Like in this one, he's got these eyelids, you know, that have come up, right? And they're not on model. We don't have Simpson's eyelids here, which is by the way the every Simpsons artist will continue to draw Simpsons in perpetuity, and that's just how it is. And so every now and again you have to look for things like, wait a minute, is that our model or is that a Simpsons model? So anyway, so Jack suddenly has these eyelids here, right? Ooh. Oh, because I didn't. There we go. So so Jack has these eyelids in this shot, right? That he didn't have right here. As he reaches forward, he's got full eyes. So his acting is going to happen as he turns, or is it going to happen after he turns? Where do we want him to start making that expression? And that decision is made by the timing director. So if you can imagine the way we would notate, I mean, it's so simple, it's so easy, that when you see it, if we were to land right cut, right, when he turns, right here, if we were to land on the board, that's a big wide open mouth, right? So it's not bad. We would call it the D expression, and this frame and this frame, this is for animators, this is a slow out. Okay, so that's what my little satanic symbol right there means. And these are just literally one drawing. That's what that mark means right there. Another drawing. And then this letter D says, I want my eyelids to look like letter D on this frame. So if you can imagine, his eyelids will go from full open, right? They in the last pose, they were full open like this, right? He's looking down, and then as he looks up, when we get our first frame of animation, those eyelids will start, right? But it's a slow in, and then this should be pushing pretty, not quite halfway, maybe a little bit less, right? So what I've called for in those 3 frames of animation is to raise the eyelids as he turns. Now, at the moment, I haven't said to turn anything. I've just said that's the expression. But one of the decisions that the timing director has to make is, where does it make more sense for him to say this? So for instance, we'll watch it. Okay, so it really listen to Ty Burrell's read of that. He's kind of going, destroy, right? So he's putting so much emphasis on this. Maybe it makes more sense to have, rather goes to it in the drawings, to have him change his expression down here. Oh, sorry, frame off. You know, maybe it makes more sense to have him on this double E, so that way when he's saying,
Can't destroy me.
we get that extra acting of destroy, like we really feel that.
Can't destroy.
So that might be an even better place. So we would do his turn here so that we kind of want to see his dialogue, right? So we definitely want to be turned into so we want to be in D around here, right? So this is a very common, this is again a drawing, right? This is another drawing. And if you notice, I've kind of made a little telephone pole in between here, right? Well, so this just means I want it on 2s, meaning I'm going to hold a drawing for 2 frames. We do a lot of 2s work in Duncanville. Expressions, if you notice, because they're eyes, we tend to do a lot of that on 1s, just because it's so small and so subtle and such a short movement. It just, you know, getting that extra in between is kind of nice. You could totally do this and it would still read, but this will read slightly better. So anyway, so we want him to turn, right? And all we have to do is tell them turn to pose if we'd like, right? We can also add more notation. Like for instance, he's lifting this thing, right? So when we want to lift him, we can actually overlap this action so that he pulls it up higher, faster, with a little more punch, right? So he can do this right here, where we're going to just do a little, what we call an overshoot, and settle him down to D. So this is a pretty long lead up. And what this is going to do is this will actually, what they'll interpret this overseas is that we want to have this box come up over here and his hand up to over here. So it's going to like sweep up, taking quite a few frames, right? It's an 8-frame move, right? And small. And then he's going to settle back to the position D. So he's going to overshoot that position and then come back to the position we called out. So we're going to have this turn with this dramatic sweep, lifting up this pyro box, right, with an overshoot and settle, and then his expression comes later. So you see, these little decisions are what we do. Like we haven't even covered a full. This is not even properly a second, I don't think. So in 1 second, you can imagine we put that much thought into where his acting should land. And so that's the real joy of this job, is getting that verbal performance and turning it into, you know, using what our colleagues gave us in the storyboards. And because truly, you know, this was there the whole time. I just drew over it to draw emphasis to that action. You know, it was never not there. But let's say we wanted to do something else. Let's say we were concerned that this expression was too much to start out with, right? What we could do is diminish it just very slightly. And when we do that, you can see we we change it so that suddenly he has the, that eyebrow that starts here, and then it goes, whoops, and then goes up just slightly. And that could give it a little bit of acting. So what we try to do is work with exactly what we have. We complete gestures, but we really tell the overseas studio where to draw drawings so that our action acts the way we want it to act.
That's really amazing, because you have to be very fine-tuned to whatever the intention of the character you wanna portray, and what kind of acting entails to that, right?
Yeah. And I always joke around that I have to work in a trance, because you do have to, like, I can't tell you how many times a day I'll act out what I'm looking at. We'll watch something, and we'll say, wait, in fact, I was literally doing this today with a character letting go of a railing. He's holding onto this railing, and the question was, does he let go on his first word or his second word? Like, where does he let go of it? And so you sit there and you act things out, or you stand up and you act it out. You do these things like, how long would it take me to lift that pedal up? Would that be a 10 frame? Is that a 12 frame? Am I overshooting, or am I slowing into it? Most people who know animation, and no matter what you do, no matter what style of animation you do, everyone's used to seeing a slow in and slow out, right? So if you, and by the way, Mo, I'm sure if you've directed animation for a long time, you know that our marks used to be like this, right? Like you do this all the time, and Harmony has done a weird thing where, because of the nature of the program, we've started to draw straight lines, which is, it's just weird, but because in a way, you would look at something like this, and you and I would feel like, oh, we're kind of guiding how we want it to feel. It kind of goes, around that bend, and see that energy is there, but truly it's not there. It's more like going bowling, you know what I mean? And the ball's left your hand and you're like leaning to try to get it to like hit that pin. Because really, the difference between this and this to an overseas animator is positively nothing. They will look at either one of these and say, yeah, okay, got it. But this one is just, it felt so good drawing it because it felt like we were acting it. But it's a bit of a misnomer. Like, we're not actually, we're not going to get any more stretch through these middle frames than we ever would have had.
Even back to the day, like we would have like small little like sketches of what we wanted the pose to be. When sometimes if it's following a certain trajectory, the slow in and slow out is normally easier to figure it out. But you would always want to cover your bases for some reason. I mean, at least that was like my mindset back then when I was doing 2D.
Yeah, and usually what you'd also have is this kind of stuff going on. Because you didn't have space, you'd have, this kind of stuff just to get into the space that we had to work with, right? And because X sheets are smaller then. Right now, our X sheets are so big that I can just keep opening out. And I have used, this much space on a very complicated, I think it was an aquarium bursting open or something, and people were getting carried by water and shooting guns or whatever. So, I had tons of overlapping action, but I was able to, just keep adding out to the left. In this particular sequence, this is funny. I'm actually playing a little game with myself here. This is the actual time sequence that went overseas. Over here, this is really the timing that we used for Jack. So as you can see, I didn't do those eyes here at all. I had him just really, well, nope. I had him just do the thing. So,
where is
so
that?
it turns out
I'm trying to read real quick. Where are the eyes?
I didn't put him in. I just had him turn to pose. So this was as I was doing it, I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I hope I did that, but I didn't. But for instance, when we talk about space, if you notice, these guys are playing guitar, right? And one of the challenges you face is guitar is very consumptive with action notation, right? So what we actually did, we gave a whole column to the guitar. So this notation right here is literally just for Jack on his guitar. And this is the rest of him. So that way, again, it comes down to real estate. You know, the real estate we have available now is just way more than what we used to. We were really limited. And now we can just keep adding not only column space out quite far to the right, but a whole different column for additional action.
So this puts into perspective something very interesting, Scott. Just a lot of our students at Gnomon are, Gnomon focuses on 3D animation. And something that I normally tell my students constantly is how important pre-planning is. Understanding what you're trying to create, so at the end, what you get is what you planned. If you don't know exactly where you want to get, anything that is around the perimeter of what you want to get will do, right? And sometimes you don't get exactly what you want. So this goes to prove of the amount of pre-planning that was set forth for, you know, when animation was conceived. I mean, this has the use of X sheets has started ever since, you know, back when animation first started. The fact that we needed to plan timing is ephemeral, so we need the pre-planning. So this goes to show how much observations you go. You observe how the guitar needs to move, and first you make annotations before you go into even working on it, which is fascinating to me, because very often what I see in students or very junior animators is that they want to start working in Maya. They want to start working in the software. And sometimes they haven't really defined what they want to get. And going back to looking at this very detailed X sheets, you show me the amount of detail that you guys go through in order to get the animation exactly the way that you want it. So this is, to me, this is really fascinating. I hope everybody at home is also appreciating the amount of work that goes through in order to get this shots done.
Yeah. Well, Mo, the beginning animators are not alone. Even I am very guilty of wanting to get in there and just put some notation down. I can't tell you, it's at least once a month that I'll get really, stirred up about a sequence that I'm working on, and I'll just start throwing down notation. I'll just be like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a 10-frame move right here with a little head tilt back, and then we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do that. And I haven't even laid in the cut lines yet. or haven't done the camera. I haven't even set up the document yet, but I had to get in there. And so we suffer from the same thing. If you're animating, you want to animate it. And same with like this is a very dense sheet, because I picked a sequence that was very visually dynamic, right? Because we had them to choose from. A lot of our stories are nowhere near as dynamic as a rock concert. And even if you have a rock concert, truly this little moment is like in the eye of the hurricane, right? It's just two guys talking, truly. Like at the end of the day, that's what this shot is. And I think a lot of us, it's part of it, right? Like you want to do the stuff, you want to get in there, you want to write the animation, or you want to animate it. And so like in our work, what we get is the people who have come straight out of animation have no white space anywhere in their sheets. They just don't have any white space at all, because they're paid to animate, so they're just going to fill the thing. They're paid to do timing, so they're just going to fill it with timing. And in episodic animation, white space is valuable. It's how it's how you pace things so that it's not frenetic. And so I feel like we're all a little guilty of trying to jump in. But to your point, if and I think what you're kind of suggesting is, if you take one look at an X sheet and say, hey, where do I want this to land? You'll actually animate to something you intend, as opposed to end up with something you end up with. And, you know, that's a little different. It's, I don't know. I'm prone to say that, you know, there are, of course, I grew up doing X sheets, reading X sheets, writing X sheets. I had to write paper X sheets back in the day. And I think a lot of our computers have helped us, you know, kind of glom over that. I mean, I have a particularly shameful moment where an animator had a very, very, very talented woman who was working for me had created something on a video test deck, and it had gotten into edit and got to the client, and I said, "What did you do? Can you make an X sheet for that?" And she couldn't. I drove her to tears, and I'm super, you know, like looking back, I'm super ashamed of it. And I feel horrible, you know, she was so talented, and, you know, like, what's the history she has with me? Oh, that's the guy who made me cry, you know, because somehow she had just created it organically. But the problem was we were making artwork that had been approved by a client now, and it was on its way to an actual camera service back in the day. And it was sort of like, well, we need to be able to recreate it. And that need with the computer, it blurs, right? Like, you just don't need to recreate it the way we do with our overseas vendors. So I can see how it would be super tempting to just skip it and to just get what you get and call that what you wanted. You know, like, people ask me, oh, would you do that for something that you were animating? And the answer I always say is like, oh, do you want to pay me to animate too? Because I'm not going to animate anything unless I'm getting paid. So, you know, like, I get that, you know, that's that fine art versus, you know, work for hire. I'm just like, oh, if I ain't getting paid, I'm going to go get a suntan somewhere. You know? Yeah, just, but to me, this is how I think. You know, I think in this notation. Obviously, this is what I do. This is my trade. I enjoy it, and for people who are decoding it, it clears up a lot of ambiguity. And one of the major things it does with overseas studios is it acts as a legal document. So, like, for instance, when we have this camera move over here, it says, scrolling to the camera move, we should have a pan adjust in the camera. There we go. So we've got this pan adjust, right? And we've written in the margin, all animation on ones during pan, right? And so if you notice, this looks very clean. I don't do this every time. You know, this isn't me being so super OCD that I repeat this artwork every time. I use drag and drops. So I don't know if you'd seen me doing it with the cut line, but we have the exact same thing for a camera pan. So I can just literally, literally drop a pan line anywhere I want it, and it already has all the notation. So I'm saving a ton of time with this because I'm able to pull from my library these camera moves. And in fact, I have whole, you know, pieces of action. This guitar action itself was all library moves. We did it once. And again, Randy Ledensky, the supervisor from Duncanville, actually sat down and actually made these drag and drops, and they basically saved the team tons and tons of time, because we could then say, okay, this is where I want the strum down, this is where I want the recover up. So all we have to do is drag it, and if we needed to, you know, we could tailor it a bit, but literally we could just drag this whole thing from the library to any place we wanted. And because this program, again, is super, you know, it's like any other program. It has a cut and paste function. It has, so we can literally, that is a drum call. So we can literally put things anywhere we want them.
Great. I mean, yeah, leverage the fact that you're doing this in the computer, not in paper, right?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Now,
truly.
sorry. Go ahead. I wanted to ask you a question, but
No, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to go back a little bit because I think you mentioned something super interesting that I want to explore. So let's just say hypothetically, somebody is paying you to animate. Let's just say that you're animating a shot, just yourself.
Okay.
And I'm telling you because very often I'm in this situation where I'm animating a shot. Would you do an X sheet for a shot that you're animating with yourself? And that actually leads into what is the usability as an X sheet when you want to communicate with others and when you want to communicate with yourself? Because I think it's an X. Sorry, I'm answering the question. Go ahead, answer.
No. I mean, in a hypothetical world, yes, I would, because this is how I think of things. This is how I problem solve. This is how I imagine things. And so truly, yes, I would. Of course, in communicating with others, that's exactly what I'm here for. But yeah, I would do it only because I'm so practiced at it that to me, this would be like writing it, and I would be able to, once you start animating, you can really get lost in your in-betweens. Like you can just really, and I do it, even when I'm correcting poses, I'll just get kind of lost. And next thing you know, you're like, wait, where are my knees supposed to be? Where do the knees go in that? I had two characters. There's a sequence that I just did on Grimsburg where two characters were tumbling. One had tackled another, and they were tumbling forwards towards the camera, and where the poses were very good. I mean, the action read perfectly, but there was this one little technical problem that actually the one of the characters' legs was going in the wrong direction. Like they needed to be facing screen left and they were facing screen right. And so truly to fix it, I had to like go back and put the legs where they needed to go, right? And again, an outstanding piece of action, brilliant piece of storyboarding, fabulous visual storytelling, but it would unless we fixed the legs, it really wouldn't have had the continuity with what my colleagues intended. So I fixed the legs as I went, right? And got them to follow the action of the scene. But even doing that, like the just getting into like, how a person flies, by the third in between, I was like, wait, what am I doing? And I think if I had to organically act without any notation whatsoever, you'd just pretty much be lost in your in-betweens all the time. You would just be trying to act in the drawings. And I would hope that anyone who's animating on their own, they at least are drawing extremes, and going from extreme to extreme. Most of what I see evident in visual storytelling is it's a mix, right, of showing extremes versus showing in-betweens, because in-betweens convey action, whereas extremes convey, a static pose. It's where the action comes to rest. So if you just went static pose to static pose, you wouldn't feel dynamic. So if you start by storyboarding your action, you're going to start with the one thing that you probably will throw away in animation, which is your in-between, kind of in a side note, but I'm sure, Mo, you've had this where you finished a product, you finished something, and someone said, "Hey, give us a frame to that represents this. Give us a PR frame. Give us some exciting frame that we can do." And you go through the edit looking for a finished frame that makes any sense at all. And what you end up with is you're like, God, how do we, where's that frame that really shows that, the thing? And the answer is, it wasn't necessary to make it move, right? It didn't give you that
you grab one that is close and you exaggerate it, or you make it more dynamic, or whatever it takes.
Yeah. Right?
Promo poses are rarely in the animation.
Exactly. And that is this critical thing about visual storytelling, right? Like we glom on to these dynamic frames when we're storyboarding because it gists the action so well. But if that is the basis of your storytelling, if that is the basis of your animation, well, congratulations, you've got an in-between. And now you have to do the extremes on either end. And if you don't know how long that gesture is, how you want it to roll out, you're just going to kind of work out from the middle of your in-between just so it's less work. And I think that's where I kind of circle back to saying, yeah, I'd probably X-sheet it out so I knew that I had an 8-frame move, and I'd start with my extremes and then in between those and then see how that looked. So yeah, it's a curious thing, right? Like that's the difference between Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes and cartoon animation, right? Like he manages to capture those, like you can just see it animating, but it's just a still frame, and were you to go to animate it, you probably would never see that drawing in the animated flow,
Yeah, or like you said, it would be a casual in between that just kind of happened to be there, but you'd have to look for these things.
Yeah. Unless you manage to grab that hold frame where you just slow into it.
That's super interesting, man. I never really thought about it as eloquently as you presented it right now. So I'm still kind of thinking about it and
well, that's the flip side. There's a lot of time to think about these little things when you're doing this kind of minutia. You get a lot of like, time with the voices. So one thing I think I've touched on, how we do our thumbnails, how we adjust poses in Harmony. I've touched on this notation, the idea of notation, right? And how these frames represent a drawing. I don't think I've talked about a couple things, and one of them is this little X right here. So I want to just talk about the way we do our notation, and this is for people are coming to this and saying, how this doesn't make any sense. How do I begin eating this elephant? And I'd say with the trunk. So the top of every sequence, we establish a frame, right? So, and I'm sorry, at every scene, we establish a frame. So for instance, right away, I'm saying Jack is going to be in panel 1. So if you can imagine, what I'm calling out is when I say panel 1, overseas, they're going to take this model as it's drawn. They're going to interpret it onto our model sheets, right? So they're going to take this action as panel 1. And if I didn't put any notation, if I just did this, if I just said 1, Jack, they would say, okay, that's 1. He wants panel 1 for this whole dang scene. They would just leave it until you tell them to change, right? So in this case, I have said Jack's going to take, 7 frames and then into his slide, right? So he's going to take 7 frames and then slide forward, okay? So I put an X here and I put a pose here. So he's going to end up in 5, right? But this X in this notation kind of acts like punctuation. It's saying this is the end of the setup, and now he's sliding. We put these X's in a lot. And what these X's are is, if you notice, there's no drawing there. It's not panel 5, and I've said panels 2 through 4 for reference, meaning I want you to look at panel 2. I want you to look at panel 4, but you're not obligated to use those. I want you to get there and then slide in 8 frames. So these first 3, I'm actually having them do in 7 frames, right? And then they're sliding to this one. So this is a this is where it becomes a dialogue with my colleagues overseas, with my counterparts there, right? Where I'm saying, please look at this. You don't have to hit these poses, but I would like you to reference them as you animate. Where I want you to absolutely hit, you're going to hit in 5, but 2, 3, and 4, how that happens for you in this time, in these 7 frames, is up to those animators. And when I tell them he's down into his slide right here, what that means is roughly by panel 3, right? He needs to be sliding. But I didn't say 3, right? I didn't call out. Sorry, let me change something quickly. I didn't say I want you to hit 3. It wouldn't be wrong. I didn't say, hey, hit 3 on panel 7. I told them down into slide, right? And slide forward. And if you notice these little marks right here, those are my slow ins. So the space he's going to cover is going to get less and less and less with each in between, right? I'll draw that bigger. So if he's sliding, you know, from point A to point B, by the time we get to a slow in, that's a lot of frames, right? So his last frames, that's actually wrong. His last movement is barely going to be any. His next one is going to be about twice as much as that. So really what we're doing is we're bringing his motion down so that if he's covering distance, those slow ins, you know, it's a slow in. It cushions the action. And in this case, it applies the friction that stops him. So this X, the idea of this X is that you need them as you change directions. You need them as you change a path. Like for instance, you see again, like the right arm strums guitar down slow fast, right? So I've got 2 slow outs on a 4-frame move. So that's really going to launch, right? And then he's coming back and slowing up really quite a bit. You know what I mean? He only has 2 frames of normal motion, and then he's going fast to slow, right? But these X's represent a change in direction. So why didn't I call out a panel for that? I just said as panel 1, as panel 10, but I didn't use panel 10. Well, let's take a look at panel 10 and see what panel 10 is. Panel 10 is down here. So it has to do with where he was on screen, because he wasn't going to be in that location. But it also has to do with telling them, I want that to kind of be where he ends. Wherever he's at, put his hand in roughly that pose. So the X's are different from our numbered panels. Our numbered panels are obligated to hit panel 9. When his eyes lead a slight head tilt and a slight lean, he's going to be drawn on model in this pose. That's what that is. Up here, he's not necessarily going to be in 3. So I draw attention to that because what I see in a lot of people who start to take this on will do a thing where they'll start a move. You know, they're just going to have a 6-frame move, and they'll start out by saying, yeah, he's going to be in panel 1, and you've already got 1 up here, so he's not going to change, right? So your first panel of action is not the hold panel. It's going to be the first panel that you want to have a new drawing in. So it's kind of just assumed that like 1 is just going to hold. Remember, Mo, how we used to do like hold lines like this, where we'd like hold until we removed. Those camera days are a little bit gone. We don't have to draw those long hold lines anymore. It's just assumed that they're going to hold in that position until you draw a drawing. Now, that being said, I'm sure somewhere out there there's a studio that's like, no, you got to draw your hold lines. You know, the exception proves the rule, I guess.
I just remember back in the day, we used to do a lot of the slow and slow out charts directly on the drawings, because we were drawing on paper, and we're like, yeah, if I need to send it to my assistant or something else, we would just do the slow ins and slow outs, even with dividers, just to show that this is exactly in the middle and this one is in the middle. Remember the little parenthesis things?
Yeah, you just do a thing like this, and you just say like, and this is still how it's done at some places, and the crazy part about that is that's kind of random. Like, how would you interpret that? I guess, like, unless you really drew it like something like this, right, where it was like, that is a viable way. I believe I actually have colleagues out there doing that stuff. I have counterparts at other
especially if you
studios.
start adding the numbers to each of the dividers, like you make the first
right.
1, sorry, and then you show which how long it takes from one to the other. I think to me, I remember making. I mean, it still does make perfect sense, and I still sometimes visualize it like that. But the action is way much more organized because you're actually seeing the frames as actual frames, right? You don't have to represent it with anything else.
Yeah, and again, remember when I was talking about getting lost in your in-betweens, because if you can imagine, if you've got a character dancing, you know what I mean, and their arms up here, and their bodies over here, and their legs coming up, and you're like, up to here, and so by 15 frames to here, and like you can just that instruction would probably get a little messy. I mean, that being said, it is the traditional way that lead animators communicate with their in-betweeners. That's how lead animators have done it, and I imagine somewhere still do. I imagine that they probably do that in the studios that supply our animation. I know for me, it's probably I've trained my brain to think in this linear, columnar kind of way of thinking that makes a lot of sense. But chances are, if I was a junior, an in-betweener trying to do walk cycles, and I was looking at those things saying like, okay, I'm sure what matters is the notation rather than just free forming it, right? Because at least you have a goal and you know where you're headed and how you're getting there. Right. And so, I'm getting conscious of one thing. I promised that I would open up to any questions. Was there any questions that I think?
I have been gathering a few, so we can talk a few of them. So, one of the questions that the audience has is how difficult was Harmony to pick up, how difficult it is to learn, and how much skill as an animator you should have prior to trying to tackle the program.
Ooh, okay. Well, those are three. Okay, so there's branches to that, right? Yes. How hard was Harmony? I can answer from the I have been teaching Harmony to internally at Bento Box, and I just taught classes to the Animation Guild members. The Animation Guild has this 5-star training program to help the disciplines and to help union members, right? And so I was teaching the timing direction for specifically for Harmony, and I can tell you that an experienced timing director can pick up Harmony in about in under 1 full-time week. An experienced timing director can transpose what they do in under 1 full-time, in under 40 hours of training. People who are coming in from animation who want to become timing directors, this is something I've seen, because again, the union, this is something we want to encourage, right? But I didn't necessarily come through animation. I was an animator, but I was also an animation director and worked in a lot of other disciplines and spent a lot of times on the editing couch and a lot of times with continuity. And as a timing director, you have to worry about more than the acting. You do have to worry about the continuity. You have to worry about how things come back to edit. And you also have to worry about all the little special effects. Like I tend to get a lot of technical sequences because when I look at it, I say, okay, the tree is shaking, so leaves need to be falling, but there's no falling leaves. So we're going to call out falling leaves since we've got impact in the tree. And each time we have impact, everyone's going to shake and settle, and they kind of don't do that yet. So when you have a lot of experience visualizing or dealing with the problems of all the issues, you tend to bring that into the process, because this is the moment where, you know, if an effect's not called out, it's not going to be there, and we're going to have to add it in post. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying make sure that you have that big picture also. Like, your acting will probably be superior in a lot of ways, but as an animator coming into timing, as an animator coming into harmony, okay, I can only tell you that I'm just gonna say it. Age tends to matter. There's a kind of an age line, and I hope I'm not sounding like a jerk, but somewhere around the mid 60s, if you were born before that time, you never had to work in computers, and you were, you know, you worked on paper until you graduated to other things, and you've been in a supervisory role, and you know what I mean? There are still paper studios, timing on paper. It happens. That seems to be more challenging. People born, like, let's say after 1965, have grown up with computer labs in college, and then computers like infiltrated the workplace as they rose through the ranks. So whereas they may not be, you know, a ZBrush guy, they have worked on computers enough so that we know that to save something, you go under the file menu and you find that pull down menu, whereas that's not necessarily intuitive. So how easy is it to pick up harmony? I will say that it's easier than picking up After Effects, for certain. It is easier and more intuitive than After Effects. It is harder than basic processing in Photoshop. So, you know, basic processing in Photoshop, you can practically make a drawing using 2% of the functions, right? So just by stumbling into the program, you can usually do pretty good. Whereas After Effects, you know, you will drive yourself in circles looking for the little caret that has to turn down to find the submenu and the layer that you're looking for. So it's between the two. If you're an animator who already works in a digital format, and you can draw, you'll have no problem. Like, you'll over lunch you can pick it up.
Also, if I remember correctly, Toon Boom is amazing at having online tutorials and online training as well. So to get you at least started with a program, right? To get you just kind of doing a couple of things. Do they still have that?
Yeah, there's a lot of videos, and now the challenge is there's so many videos and so many user videos that you're almost choked out by your options. Because what it ends up being is, you know, you're like, oh, I need a function in Toon Boom, right? So I need to figure out how to, you know, hold in-betweens in Toon Boom. And suddenly you've got videos where it's like, hey, it's Dale. Today we're gonna go to step 2 of rigging our character. And you're like, wait, that's not what I asked for. So, you know, you've got a lot of content available, but the University of Tube has a lot of courses available, so you have to be careful. Toon Boom themselves, they do have fairly good training programs. I will say that that it's very linear. Like, you know, you're going to start with your bouncing ball, and you're going to store your in-betweens, and so I was taught by Randy Ludensky, again, who I have to give a lot of credit to. He wrote the manual on it. He's very good at teaching it. Truly, when I do any education program, I just really actually reteach what he taught me and do it how he taught me how to teach it. So it's not super hard. For people who know computers, easy. For people who know, if you don't know how to draw, it's a drawing program. Like, you You can take pieces and rig them and, you know, use them as, you know, you like make pivot points and do that. And I see my counterparts overseas all the time doing, you know, that stuff.
Like paper cut puppets kind of deal.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, you can do that. So, you know, if you were not a talented illustrator who can draw and model and stuff like that, you could conceivably, you know, collaborate or collect the pieces you need and still actually create animation without drawing anything. It's not really what the program's strengths play to. Like, there's so much to the ink and paint and so much to the layering that you're missing out on, but it is conceivable, you know.
Awesome. So going into kind of the same in the same direction, where would you think is the best place for young animators to learn how to work with X sheets, or to know to get to know all the names and all the different symbols that go into creating an X sheet?
And you know what? Let me caveat that whole answer by saying studios are different. Some studios make notation totally different from Bento. So just because I showed it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. It's just the way we're doing it right now with Harmony and the way we like things. There are perfectly legitimate alternatives to notation, right?
Just to say, there is no like animation standard for doing it. There's multiple different ways, whatever suits each studio.
Yeah. There's more than one right answer to the question. Where would I tell a young animator to go? This is always a challenge, right? Because if you want to learn X sheets, we were, you know, I think we've had a previous conversation about the textbooks are not wrong. You know what I mean? Like Preston Blair, ages ago, wrote about how to write and read an X sheet. There are some online resources for it, and basically, you know, the thing that I've noticed is hard to find is getting your hands on the stuff that I was showing you. You know, the notation that I make. Like, where do you find X sheets for shows? Well, they're gone. They are gone. You're never gonna find them. Because once they're done working, they're done. Unless we really want to beat up an animation vendor and have them make a revision, we really don't have any. Like, once it goes, if it comes back looking all right, that's it. It's dead. It's gone and it's buried, and you'll never see it again. So it's not like it's widely circulated. And you know, so I'm sorry, I'm telling you why I can't show you what you should know, as opposed to saying where would a young animator go. I'd be very cautious about looking for, again, I'm sorry, that's negative advice. What would I do? Yes, the thing to do if you want to learn timing is to find a way to apprentice. Even as an animator, you're going to need an apprenticeship because it's going to take you time. You can learn the program in under 40 hours. To learn timing takes much longer. Even as an animation director, when I started learning timing, it took me really months before my sheets were usable. And it's a lot of just fine-tuning the way you think about things to work in the episodic pipeline. Because, you know, you just don't think about it right, even an experienced director. So I would genuinely look for an internship of some type to get more experience, if that is something you want to do. If you're an animator who wants to learn it, yeah, I would again go back to the classics, because it is kind of a classic thing. I would yeah, that's the number one place I would think. It's going to be really hard to say something like, oh, you should watch you should watch a resource and watch it frame by frame. Remember, I think you and I probably both were of the era when suddenly we'd get those Panasonic security decks, or a deck that could go frame by frame, and suddenly we could watch motion frame by frame on videotape. And I think in some ways we were in kind of a window that doesn't exist anymore, because there are no RM80 Sony 3/4 inch decks around anymore. Right? And we would spend our hours going what and watching frame by frame, or we'd I mean, God, I had
I still do it on Keyframe Pro or Sync Sketch when I'm reviewing different animation. I mean, it's still pretty awesome research to be able to go frame by frame. But circling back a little bit to X Sheets, and you mentioned that an internship is probably a good way to find some mentorship. Do you think, in your experience, or are studios open to mentoring programs that have shown that they have the will and somewhat the talent of understanding timing to how to create these X Sheets?
I will tell you that Bento Box values timing tremendously. Like, it is from the top down that we're given a lot of value, and we're given a lot of. Not all studios are like that. In fact, a good friend of mine who works at Cartoon Network was saying, "Oh, we don't even have in-house timers. We just hire freelancers." So it's a bit of the wild west in this particular area. And I will say, it's the type of thing where time and time again, what ends up happening is shows that don't do timing, or do inexpensive timing, or baseline price timing. Like the union rate, I believe, just went up from $4 a foot, or just got set at $4 a foot. I get paid way more than $4 a foot. I wouldn't even work for $4 a foot, because I can't do this level of work at that price. Like, that's just not possible. But there are studios out there that's what they pay, and someone's going to take the work, and they're going to do the work they can do for that price. And
just to kind of like bring it into perspective, what do you explain a little bit about what a foot is, because that's also a very traditional way to looking at animation.
I'm sorry, it's 16 frames. It is 16 frames is 1 foot. So not quite a second, right? That's one of those, like, oh, it's a little bit under a second. So basically, when you and it adds up, because our footage is very balanced at Bento Box. At other studios, they'll want like over 250 feet a week, which is just breakneck pace. And at that pace, you're just not going to get the attention to detail. You'll get what you get. So like I say, Bento is they put a lot of value into it. They get a lot of return on it, and they're very supportive of our role, and it's a good place for that. I think the work shows it. I know that they must use X Sheets at Titmouse, because I'm close with a revisions animator there who was saying he was looking at the X Sheets. and so for young people, so for young people starting out, like at the end of the train, there's oftentimes revisions that have to be done, where you fix things. Like, for instance, this thing that I caught with the pedal, if that had made it through, probably someone would have to revise that in either in retakes, which are expensive, or in the studio with an animator. What they mostly do is get back the mouth positions that got cut. That's a lot of the job of a retake animator, and it's a good place if you want to learn. If you apply yourself, and if you look at the X Sheets and you look at what's happened, you can connect the dots through that. It's tough to self-teach, It's as though if you sat down at sheet music and tried to teach yourself what it was without knowing how to play piano. That's kind of what it would be like, really. Even if you know how to animate.
Right. Well, great answer. Definitely very in depth. I have a couple more.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Do animation timers typically do their work in different passes, or what kind of different workflows have you seen in terms of that?
Okay. Yes. Yes. So Harmony has changed the workflow a little bit. What we do encourage is head to toe, right? Go all the way down. But we do it in passes. This is very much what we do. So the very first thing you have to do is cut up your scene and lay in the cut lines, like you saw me working with the lip assign, right? And deciding where to put that cut. So the very first thing I do when I come to a sequence is I do what I call cut it up and move it out, right? So the first thing I do is I put in all my cut lines, and then I actually put in all my moves. And the reason I put in my moves is not to have them be the absolute final place where I'm going to put my moves, but so I'm thinking about how I'm going to, like, if that move changes a character, it changes a walk cycle, it changes things, I want it to be in there first. So I'll cut it up and move it out, and then I'll hook it up. So hooking up is another thing that that we didn't really touch on, but it deals with continuity. When we go overseas, we want to notate if two characters, or if a character appears in sequential scenes, because when they animate overseas, what they actually do is they split it all up. Like they don't have access to the full sequence. These animators literally get a shot, and unless you say, hey, this hooks up, they're not going to know that it should have any kind of continuity of any kind with the previous shot. So that's something I have to do when I do it. And then as I go into the acting, because of the library that you have in Harmony, I'm able to drag and drop in walk cycles. So I don't actually have to chart out my walks over and over and over. If I want a 12-frame walk cycle, which is most average humans do a 12-frame step, right? Or I should say an average height male does about a 12-frame step, right? So he does about 2 steps per second, right? Blah, 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 blah. So if I drew that day in, day out, my hand would fall off. Fortunately, with Harmony, I can just drag and drop all those walks in. So I'm literally tonight working on a segment of Grimsburg where 2 characters are walking. So I'm laying in the walks first and getting all their steps right and making sure their steps aren't going to slide, making sure that I'm calling out the right poses. So I'm going to do those walks first, and then I'm going to worry about their acting. And if they need to take a pause or something like that, I can fix it. But so there is multiple passes, and what it really comes down to, the translation of what I'm saying is the drag and drop function from the library is what allows me to kind of do multiple passes. I'm dragging in my cut lines. Then I'm dragging in my moves. Then I'm dragging in my walks. So it's anything that I can easily source, and then I can go to work on the finer bits, the acting and tooling that.
That makes perfect sense. It's I guess it's the evolution of put something in paper so you can see if it works, and if it doesn't, just change it, right?
Right.
But you cannot expect to have only the perfect lines in the paper. You need to put something and then evaluate. So that's what you're doing. You're evaluating first the movement, and then you're setting up some of the layers on top of it. And then if you need to go and move that one for whatever reason, because
I can go back and change it. Yep. And of course, then, I will also tend to, if it's an effects heavy shot, I will drop in all my effects work first, because that tends to be like, that's the stuff that you forget later. Because once you've done all the acting, you hit the sequence, you're like, great, cool, send it. And you'll forget, like, oh crap, it's supposed to be fog. Damn it, there's only fog, or DX dust coming off of this, or backlight DX light source. I'll do those effects pretty early on before I even do the walk cycles. So,
I have a question of my own that I want to ask.
Go for it.
You have a checklist at the end of once you're done, before you send it, that you need to go through and see, like, okay, I want to make sure that everything is correct. Where's my checklist? And just kind of go through it. And is it possible for you to share it?
It is. So after I'm done with my work, the closest working colleagues, the people who basically work on the same team as me, are the checkers. And the checkers have an even more important job, because what they do is, when I've called out, panel 5, they make sure that there is a panel 5, that there's a model sheet for the character that corresponds to that scene, that there's they have to make sure that the package is truly sendable. I'm much more concerned about the continuity to the action, the continuity of the acting, the creative part of it. They're very, very administrative. But when I do finish doing my work, I pretty much go scene by scene, panel by panel, and say, okay, panel 1, what am I looking at? Okay, I'm looking at, Jack, his guitar, the ex-wife, the fireworks, fireworks are on background. Great. Ex-wife has her column. Great. So I pretty much make sure that everything I see has something, is at least called out. And then I go to the next scene and start again. And one of the most important things I do for my checker colleagues is I go through and I look, okay, panel 1 is the same as panel 2, same as panel 3. Okay, panel 4 changes, but I'm not using it. So panel 4 is out, or panel 4 is for reference. And so I literally go panel by panel and just make sure that if it's in, that it's called out. And if it's out, it's notated that it's out, or notated for reference. And I do that for every single panel. And so after I've done all the acting and all the movement and all the effects and all the king's horses and all the king's men, I make sure that all those poses are not are just either there or not there. It's really simple. Objective, right? Objective observation. Are they there? What am I looking at? Is it called out? And that saves them a lot of hopefully. I always hope it saves them a lot of time and effort. As it is, they'll have a problem because they have to, I'm not necessarily when frame 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, and 11 are all the same drawing. I'm not going to say 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 11 are all the same drawing. I'm just going to be like panel 2 out. And so they actually have the burden of going through and saying, oh, okay, 2, 7, 4, 9, 11. Oh, those are all the same thing. Never mind. So they have a bit of work that I just can't protect them from, but I can help them where I can. Sorry. Yeah, that's the checklist at the end.
No, that sounds great, man. Thank you so much for giving us a window, probably very narrow, because I'm sure that there's a lot more that goes through. But it was really cool to see what you do. So thank you so much for coming and showing us a really cool demo, and to show us how you get to be an animation timer on Bento Book. So really appreciate it, Scott. I wanted to thank you for being here, and I want to thank everybody for joining us for this event. I think that we would love to see you guys come see us at the next event. And again, I want to thank Lenovo for making this stream possible. And I don't know if do you want to say anything, Scott, before we leave? Oh, it looks like it's frozen.